Welcome to another episode of Over This Should podcast, where today we're going to deep dive into the stories and insights of one remarkable individual. Today we have the pleasure of speaking with Gila Green, an accomplished author whose work spans novels, short stories, flash fiction, and poetry. Gila's writing explores complex themes such as immigration, racism, and personal transformation, often set against the backdrop of diverse cultural landscapes. As a Canadian expat living in Israel and a mother of five, Gila brings a unique perspective to her storytelling, blending personal experiences with universal themes. Join us as we explore her creative journey and powerful narratives that she crafts. Welcome, Gila.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me, Pamela. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's our pleasure. Is there anything from that intro that I missed that you want to add, that you want to tell us about yourself?
I'm also English as a foreign language college teacher. Been doing that for more than 10 years. So I spend a lot of time with a lot of young people, and I'm trying to navigate their careers. And I'm also a writing coach and a book editor.
That is amazing. In thinking about your authorship, your writing covers a wide range of themes from immigration to personal transformation. So, what's really inspired you to tackle such diverse and complex topics?
Well, first of all, I think it goes a lot back to the title of your program here, sort of getting over that should, is what you're told usually when you want to go into writing with the goal of publication is that you should pick one genre and stick with it. So you want to be known as a romance writer, you want to be known as an adventure writer or science fiction. You want to sort of establish a name, but that's good advice. But it just doesn't interest me. I'm just interested in so many things and so many different things that even though practically in theory that makes a lot of sense, right? Get known for one thing, whether you're working in fashion or wherever you're working, it's good to establish yourself in one thing. But practically that just doesn't work for someone like me who has very eclectic interests. So I've lived in 3 different countries. I have a lot of different interests. So that just is reflected in my writing.
I love that. That really speaks to that idea of being multi-passionate. I would say my career has taken similar turns. I would figure out a role and then I would say that's great. Now what's the next thing? What's the new angle? What's the new thing I can learn? What's been really cool about that experience from a career perspective is it's made me a really diverse candidate. I've touched so many different elements of business operations that there's a lot of ways that I could be plugged and played. So I love that for you because you have this diversity and complexity to your work, but just for anybody listening, you don't have to be put into a corner because somebody says you should have one direction. You should get your degree and follow that path. Good advice for some people, but if you have that itch to learn and grow and keep doing different things, lean into that multi-passionate side of yourself. I like that for you as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so tell us a little bit about your journey to becoming an author because you have published several books now. You are a writing coach, you are a teacher, like you have a lot of amazing things going on in your life. So what took you towards becoming an author?
Well, I was always a big reader, which probably doesn't come as a surprise. I've always really surprised when people who come to me and want to write a book tell me that they don't read or don't have time to read. That's probably not the best place to start from. You should be reading if you want to write. Sometimes people have these very unfounded fears. No, but I want to be original. I don't want to copy someone else. I want to have my own voice. I'm worried that if I read, and that's completely unfounded. If you're going to be an architect, you have to go and look at buildings and look at housing and look at structures. And you can't, you're not an architect who closes their eyes every time you walk down the street or goes into a commercial area. That just wouldn't work. If you want to, be a fashion designer, you have to see what's out there. So that's the same thing with writing. So I was always a big reader. I really enjoyed writing. My first degree was in journalism, but I took a journalism degree back like in the dinosaur days, really pre-internet. In those days, I think we were the only group on campus that even had access to computers. I don't know if you remember the big floppy disks and etc. So by the time I was old enough to really practice journalism had really changed and was a lot less interesting to me. It seems to have become a lot more partisan and a lot more just kind of almost rooting for a particular team, just really not why I was driven into going into journalism in the first place. but I had acquired all these skills from the degree, excellent skills, particularly editing skills and interviewing skills, how to meet deadline skills, which are just invaluable. If you constantly have to meet deadlines for years on end, you really can't get anything better than that. And so I wanted to do something with these skills. And I also found myself at home with small children. And I really, really wanted to be with them. My mother worked outside the home, and I probably ate more dinners by myself or with my brother than I would have liked to. So I didn't want, I think we all kind of, one generation kind of reacts to the next. And so I didn't want that. I didn't want my kids to come home and, to a note on the fridge, like heat up this, add this, and I'll be home around 7. I didn't want that. So I had to find a way. How can I stay home with my young kids, but also earn a living? Because not too many people can have, one income family today. And just myself, I want to do something of my own. So writing really became an excellent outlet for that. I just realized that people are just writing everything under the sun, and you can help them with so many different things. You can take those skills and you can apply them to just about anything people are writing. I've edited cookbooks, memoirs, really anything. And of course, that grew. Or now we're on Zoom, right? Before Corona, we probably wouldn't have been on Zoom. This grew. In the beginning, it wasn't nearly as common as it is today, but it was still there. And then every year it expanded until people didn't even want to meet you in person anymore. In the beginning, people would say, well, let's just meet first for coffee. I kind of want to know you if I'm going to have you look at my book. And nobody wants to meet me anymore for coffee. At most a Zoom coffee. And it's all online. So that's also grown with me, which has been, really helpful. Sometimes people have chosen paths that have shrunk with time. This has actually expanded with time. Now it's even more accessible. I can be speaking to people. I just gave a talk recently, just a couple of weeks ago, on how to write headlines to a whole group of people in India, so it's only expanding more and more, and there's just endless possibilities, really absolutely endless.
So take me back in time then. You said you had 3 little ones at that time. How did you balance having the 3 little ones under your feet and then writing and editing? What did that look like from a day-to-day perspective, and how did the process flow for you?
Well, okay, let's just put a dose of realism. So for the first 3 kids, I didn't actually work that much, except for really basic projects I could do from home, just for helping out with the family financing. Like it could be as basic as data entry, organizing, things that I could really do on automatic pilot. That's what I did for the first 3. I really didn't do things that would, even though there's creativity in everything to a certain extent, but I really didn't do anything that would require a lot of brain power. All of my brain power, creativity was going into mommy power, sort of no screens. How do we make Play-Doh on our own? How do we, do all these things that I wanted to do with my kids and have that kind of childhood for them.
Right.
By the time I had 3 little ones, then I really was, I guess, intellectually understimulated. And I did want to do something else. But I realized also, which I think is something that people should know, that it's important to have some kind of a community. No matter how small it is, some kind of a community around you so that you're not operating in a vacuum. So I actually registered for a master's degree in creative writing at Bar Ilan University, which is just in a suburb of Tel Aviv, really. Not too far, an hour from my home. And even though it's a very small program, we were a dozen people, it doesn't matter. A community doesn't have to be, a country. A community just has to be a few people who are taking what you're taking seriously just as seriously. That's all it really has to be. So I suddenly had this community and people to bounce ideas off of. And people were dramatically different. There were, single men in the program or women who were already grandmothers in the program. It doesn't have to be demographically aligned with where you are at that moment. It just has to be that their interest right now and what they're taking really seriously right now is the same as you. What I did, I literally got the names of all the professors who would be teaching. I phoned each one of them and said, I'm going to be having this baby. After the first semester, how do you feel about a baby in class? I actually personally phoned them. They were fighting over that baby. They were like, baby's in class.
Oh,
Please
cool.
bring your baby. But as I said, otherwise I'm not going to register because I knew I was going to have this baby midway. And when I do something, I like to do it the whole way. So I start
Mhm.
to check it out. And so I actually brought her with me from 3 weeks old. And the professors would be holding her while they were lecturing, and everybody would just, she was really good. And so that's an important point. When you want to start something new, find a little community. It doesn't take much. It really doesn't take much. And that was really motivating for me. The professors were really encouraging me to send out my work, to get it published, which in those days was like stamps and envelopes, actually mailing short stories. And then I just started publishing. And, success is the best motivator to continue. So you publish a little short story and you just think, wow, like you've won the lottery. And you just keep going from there. So that's really how I started with the writing and the publishing. And then from then on, I was really doing that like until today.
That's a great story. So success is a great motivator. I would agree with that. I am curious, along that path, did you have failures that you learned from and that motivated you?
Oh yeah. I mean, I don't know how you define failure, but I mean, but writing is all about rejection. If you expect to send out a short story that even you could have worked on it for a year and then just have it accepted to the first place, that's it's just an unrealistic expectation. That's like saying I need a job and I'm going to send my resume, and the first person who gets my resume is going to call me and hire me tomorrow. I mean, that's just not realistic. You have to learn sort of what vibe your work suits, what tone of magazine it suits. You could be sending it to a magazine that's completely not sort of the atmosphere or tone that you write or the genre that you write. You learn
Hmm.
as you go how to target your work. You look at what they've published until now. Do they only publish New York Times best-selling household names? Then it's probably not worth your while to send there. You learn as you go. So I don't consider rejections failures, but you certainly can't be in the business of, I think, any art if you don't see rejection as just part of it's like playing like an athlete, he's gonna strike out, he just
Hmm.
keeps playing, right?
Hmm.
So yeah, there's plenty of that,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah, I've heard rejection is just redirection. And I would agree with that. And to what you said, I think that's applicable across no matter what your career is, whether you're fortunate to be a creative person like you or you are in a corporate job, being able to understand your skill set and where it fits in the best and how to reach out and cross the bridge to communicate clearly with the folks that you want to work with or in the genre that you're wanting to work with. I think that's skills that's transferable everywhere. But I love that what is failure? It's it's a step along the way. It's rejection, which is redirection. I think that's a really good way to look at it instead of ruminating and, oh no, this didn't go the way I wanted it to. You just look at it, use it as a stepping stone and move forward.
100%. You really have to do that with everything. You have to have realistic expectations. A lot of times this rejection had nothing at all to do with you. Like by the time your story got there, their quota was filled, or you wrote about a mother-daughter relationship and they had already chosen a mother-daughter relationship story and they didn't want the whole issue to be mother-daughter relationship stories. A lot of times it just really had nothing to do with you. Just like when you apply for a job, you apply and then the next day, the person hires their cousin.
Right?
It didn't have anything to do with you. Their cousin happened to move to town and say they needed a job, right? So
Mhm.
people have to sort of really broaden their lens of why things didn't work out and sort of take the mirror off them sometimes. Maybe you're always hearing that it's not about you. It's not about you. There's a good chance it wasn't about you, but maybe it was. Maybe you're applying for jobs that that don't take in people with less than 5 years experience,
Mhm.
and maybe you sort of fudged it on the phone and then got there and realized, oh no, she was really serious when she said minimum 5 years experience. You have to look at all the
Right.
possibilities. I see it a lot with students. If they don't get the grade they want to give up. They're crushed. English is not an easy language to master. So they're just, I hate English. English hates me. I'm never going to speak it. Right? You see it a
Yeah.
lot in the academic setting, and you have to learn how to break that down for them and
Mm.
put it in perspective. I'm like, what is really the problem here? Are you really expected to speak English the way someone from Toronto or London? And just constantly breaking things down into small components, I think, is my best advice.
That's really good. And I love it what you said, because I think through my career, I've learned sometimes a job will get posted. I've seen this, right? Sometimes my company will post a job and we have internal candidates in mind, but we have to post it outward. And so you have all these applicants who come in and go through the interview process. And unless they absolutely can do something that changes the company's mind from promoting within, they get passed on. So that isn't a reflection of them. But what they can do and what a student can do and what a writer can do is say, I understand that I did not get selected for this job. Would you please help me understand how I could have interviewed better? What did you like about my interview? And how can I improve this in the future? And then if somebody's kind enough to give you feedback, you have a few nuggets in your pocket for how to do things differently moving forward.
100%. I just recently had that with my son. He was going through interview processes. He's in accounting and he was getting really frustrated because he needs to do an internship. Accounting, you have to do an internship. And after a couple of interviews, we sat with him and we said, like, tell us what have you been saying? How have you been dressing? What did you wear to your interview? Because, different parts of the country have different styles and you're interviewing in different parts of the country. So what's fine, what might be really, just blend right in. I don't know exactly where you're located, but
Virginia, America.
in Virginia might not blend in Miami or
Sure.
New York. And every little thing I said to him, well, what shoes are you wearing? What shirt are you wearing? Because now you're going to a much bigger city. We're out in a little cozy suburb here. We're going to a much bigger city, a very fashionable, fast-paced city, very big company with thousands of employees, international companies. How are you dressing? And how are you responding? And we went over the way he was answering all the questions and we tweaked it. And the next interview, they literally called him an hour later and said, you got the job.
Wow.
And he knew that it was because of our tweaks.
Right. That's pretty amazing. There's a quote that says, I don't lose, I win or I learn. And I love that because I think if we took that as a lesson, the failures aren't just failures. I'm not just winning or losing. Every success, every setback, every redirection, every no, every yes is something I should be learning from. And I should learn. Let's talk about what you're wearing based on where you're going. Let's talk about who you will be interviewing you. What does the company look like? What's on their About Us page? All of those little elements help make a decision into how, I show up from what I'm wearing head to toe, the confidence in my stance. It doesn't mean you have to change your character. Your integrity is your integrity, but what you wear on the outside to make sure that you have a sense of connection does matter. So those little elements, breaking it down into small pieces of learnings, that's very important. I like how you described the importance of just chunk by chunk. What was I wearing? Who was I talking to? Where was I at? I think that's brilliant. I want to talk for a moment before we hit record. You had mentioned the length of publishing. So I was fortunate to be a co-author on a book that was published, and the publishing company took care of so many details. So we went from writing, editing to published on Amazon really quickly. Your process that you were talking through of publishing with a smaller publishing company and making it onto Amazon is a much longer process. Can you walk us through what that looks like?
Small press doesn't have a lot of reach, right? There's different reasons to publish with small press as opposed to a huge press.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, large presses are less accessible, but sometimes, for me, I tend to write more niche stories that aren't, especially today with all of the sort of, I don't even know the word anymore, political correctness, for lack of a better word, that's going on in the art world in general, publishing. So it's all kind of sounding a little bit formulaic and, it's really hard to write your own story today. I'm not talking about if you're already famous or a celebrity, that's a different. But if you're a regular person, like I'm just a regular person, it's getting harder and harder to sort of express your own voice today because a lot of the a lot of what's coming out is it's just sort of on a formula, because people are terrified, for lack of a better word, to publish anything or put out anything, that isn't going to sort of make everybody happy, which of
Right.
course there's no such thing. But that's kind of the what's going on right now, for better or for worse. I obviously think it's for worse, but it's almost like just kind of a veil. So small press still allows, you know, more individuality and more your own voice and more your own story, without a lot of the constant cosmetics and aesthetics that they're putting over everything, so that we all basically sound exactly the same, think the same, and everyone's the same. And no one wants to live in a world like that. So with small press, usually, because they want to encourage ordering directly from them, at least from the beginning, they'll put your book out into pre-order, because they are hoping that you're going to send some to reviewers, or maybe book clubs that they want to get some direct orders. They're not stupid, and they know that the second they put it on Amazon, everyone's ordering from Amazon. Very few people, like this press happens to be in Montreal, but it doesn't matter where the small press is. It could be, it could be in Kentucky, it could be in Virginia. Very few people are going to look for that little press and order directly from them. Like I said, also because people have to pay them the full postage rates. And they're fully aware that most people have, I think it's called Amazon Prime, where they don't pay any postage rates. And they have all these different, especially in the US, they have all these different packages for delivery there. And so they're fully aware that no one's going to order from, somewhere Virginia Press, pay the $20 postage. Right. They're just going to wait till it comes out on Amazon, or they want it on their Kindle. So they're going to wait. So they put in this year that at least this way, they might get whatever it is, 50 orders, 100 orders, 250 orders, because some people, like my good friends, did order directly from them.
I also learned from you earlier about your Audible experience. Can you walk us through what it was like to record your book with a good eye?
Well, I've always wanted to do an audiobook. Really professionally done audiobooks go into the thousands of dollars. Certainly anything that I've ever looked for. Probably a lot of readers don't realize, but most authors already put quite a lot of money into their books. They pay for professional editing, maybe another edit, maybe a proofreader. I always tell people, you're putting out books because you have a story you want out there. If you're putting it out there because you think that's going to be your main income or something, that's pretty unrealistic. I have other jobs, and then I put out the books that I want out there, but I don't look at them as like primary sources of income. I look at them as just something I really enjoy doing. So I wanted to do it less expensively. One way to do it less expensively is to record your own audiobook, and then pay, for a sound engineer to, they'll take out all the spaces and breathing or whatever it is, and then upload it yourself. I've read different things. Obviously, you have people who are vehemently against this and they consider it very unprofessional, etc. There's always going to be people with opinions, whatever you do. If you become a vegan, you'll have opinions. If you become a vegetarian, you'll have opinions. If you only eat meat, you'll have opinions. If you, cut off dairy, you'll have opinions. So you're always going to have opinions. But I actually do like listening to authors read and how they see things. Now, the big thing about it is usually sound. So often if you go online and you read advice, they'll tell you, like, people literally go into a cupboard, like a closet, with a flashlight, and they read. Now, I live in Israel, and I stand to be corrected, but I think any house built like post 1992, could be 1999, but I think it's 1992, has to have a mandated bomb shelter or safe space, which we're in right now. So most people use these rooms as offices, spare bedrooms, a den. Like it just looks like an ordinary room. It just happens to have, extremely thick walls and, a shatterproof window, et cetera, et cetera. So actually, bomb shelters are really good places to record audiobooks, as I learned, because as an author, some people who live, more locally have wanted to interview me in my house, and they're always looking for that quiet space where they don't hear the traffic. And we always end up in this room because it's actually soundproof. So I didn't have to hide in a cupboard with a flashlight. I actually just sat right here where I've written all my novels, and do all my work. But I ended up really just getting up at 3 in the morning and recording here because just like with the kids, with the dog, with the, because every time you get interrupted, you just start all over again, right? You could be on the last sentence of the chapter and you just start again. So I found the easiest thing was actually to record from like 3 to 9 in the morning and then go to bed.
I'm with you. I love when I hear the announcement like that this book is read by the author. I get excited. Like when Brene Brown reads one of her books, I love that opportunity. And to your point of whether you choose vegan or vegetarian, record your own book, not record your own book, there's always going to be somebody who has an opinion. When you put yourself out there, you put yourself in front of naysayers. Can you walk me through as a creative what that's been like? How do you handle the naysayers? What do you do with the information you get from them? Do you listen to any of it?
No, I don't listen to any of it. And I don't think you should. I remember when I was expecting that fourth baby and, some neighbors, whatever, people around the neighborhood, when they found that I was going to go and do my master's in creative writing, I mean, the looks what? Like, what are you going to do with that? Like, who gets a master's in creative writing? Yeah, a lot of people thought that was just absurd, that someone, who's about to be a mom of four should be, I don't know, going into high tech or computers or, which is all great. Just something very practical, maybe, I don't know, become an accountant, which I'm all for. I'm just not good at that. So that was really, I just ignored those people. I think at the program itself, there were some people, because I was expecting and then I came with a baby, they also kind of thought like, okay, like what's mommy going to be presenting sort of, next time, kind of like what's mommy going to do? People really have no idea what women can do, and they can do them like nursing and like typing the story with the other hand and doing so many things. My husband's from South Africa. He's from Johannesburg. And I remember way in the beginning, we were separated for a good year. And this was before internet and FaceTime and all that. And also people were like, how are you going to have this long distance relationship? Like, you don't even know what he's doing there. You always get this. And it was just like, okay, so you don't have a long distance relationship. Like, it sounds like long distance relationships aren't for you. That's what I'm hearing. So what I'm very often hearing from people when they say those things is that wouldn't work for them. It's all about them, that they would have to do a degree that sort of had a very, strongly outlined, very directed outcome. Like, a degree in law means you're a lawyer, a degree, but like, what's a degree in writing? What does that, that they need that kind of very strong, well-defined outcome in their degree choice. So that's great. Or they don't think that, you can have children and pursue artistic things and creative things. So, okay, so I guess don't do that. Do you know what I mean? I'm talking really about themselves and their own insecurities and their own fears. I don't feel like they're talking about you at all. Because if they knew you, they wouldn't be saying that. People in general are talking about themselves, right?
Right. Or to your point, just trying to put their beliefs onto you. It would have been a change for you, if I understand your story correctly, if you chose to stay at home with the little ones and make the homemade Play-Doh and do the more traditional role, and then with your fourth go back or go to get your master's degree. That feels like maybe a change in how you were showing it previously. Did that have anything to do with it? Were there people in your inner circle who said, "Wait a second, like you were the traditional doting mom, and now you're going to go to school too? What's going on? Why are you changing?"
No, I mean, most of the women I know do have what's considered by today's standards large families and work. I think it was more what I chose to study.
Okay.
Didn't seem practical, seemed like almost for, I mean, master's degrees aren't free, right?
Oh.
They also cost money. So it seemed almost like frivolous. Was dreaming like like what are you gonna write sort of thing. I mean, again,
Interesting.
people who write, it presupposes that you feel that you have something to say. So if you don't feel like you have anything to say, then yeah, probably don't pursue a writing career. Like, I feel like I have a lot to say. So
Hmm.
suits me. I also like working with writers. I like meeting them. I like encouraging them. I wrote a post not so long ago called Stop Apologizing to Me. And it was about the number of clients I get, writing coach clients who are women, I would say 50 plus, that we meet on Zoom first. And they spend the first 15, 20 minutes apologizing. I'm really sorry. This is so silly. Like, I do want to write this. I know it seems ridiculous. Just apologizing that they have something to say, and making sure that I'm aware that, they've raised their kids already. They've had their career already. All their spare money has always gone to their kids. And this is just like a little tiny bit that they've put to themselves to sort of spoil themselves. Now they have a story and they want a writing coach. And it's just apologizing for it. I can tell you honestly, I've never had a male client apologize. I've never ever met a man on Zoom. It doesn't matter if he was just, any profession, any age, who spent 20 minutes trying to justify why he had this story that he wanted to tell. And so I wrote this post, like, you don't have to apologize. That you feel, you survived something or you went through something, you had a certain experience, now you want to write about it and you want some help. And that's always really struck me, how women do that, how we're programmed to do that.
Right. Yeah, I would agree. We're programmed to not be an interruption for somebody. We're programmed to be humble, and all of those things we feel like make us lead with, I'm sorry, but I wanted to add, I'm sorry, but I needed to say, I'm sorry if I interrupted you. I'm sorry that I have a dream. I'm sorry that I have this creative outlet I want to pursue because it's not what you think I should be doing with my time. I'm with you. We need to stop apologizing for showing up. Like, we're just showing up and trying to live. If you have a creative passion, if you're multi-passionate, if there's something that you want to be doing, if you don't want to do anything, if you just need to relax because you're burning the candle at both ends or just because you want to, you don't have to apologize for it. Because like what you've experienced, I've experienced the same. Men don't apologize for taking a day off of work. Men don't apologize for going hunting, fishing, out with the guys, whatever their jam is. And yet we feel the need to apologize for any behavior that is outside of the very, very norm, traditional paths that we think we're supposed to follow. And that's really unfortunate.
Yeah. And also, like, apologizing, I mean, that for the financial aspect of it, as though I need to be reassured that their kids have everything they need. And they're just doing this little splurge by, hiring a writing coach. Like, it's always like, I'm finally just doing something for me. And it's this whole big intro preamble. Like, I don't ask people those kind of questions. I ask them about the book, what they want to do. I don't ask them, well, did all your kids get their birthday presents this month and everything before you, hire me? I don't ask them any such thing. And so it's global as well. I mean, these women are from different countries.
Right. So
It's not
interesting.
it's not one particular place. It's really, really global. It's the same thing with the number of kids. I don't, so I feel like women have to apologize if they have like a big family. Like, if I had more energy, I'd have had more kids. I just didn't. I just had to be realistic. I don't think that people should have to apologize for that either, or not having kids, or however you decide. I don't think that those things have to be apologized for. I also doubt that men apologize for whether they have kids or if they do, what number they have.
Now women seem to be getting more vocal here in the States, but there are more men who will tell you that you have the ordained purpose to procreate. And I'm saying this from experience on social media. Instead of understanding that, to your point earlier, they want to procreate. So go find somebody to have babies and live happily ever after and have 1 or 5 or 10, your choice, man. Like, you do you. But don't put your beliefs of what good looks like on everybody else, because we're not one size fits all. And I think that gets really lost when people are so dug into their beliefs and their ideology. And it's a really big struggle for women because people vocally tell women how they should live. We don't run around telling men, you're 34 and you haven't had a baby yet. What are you waiting on, man? Tick tock, tick tock. But we're totally fine telling that to a woman.
Right. But then, then not too many.
Right.
Right? But then if you say five, it's like, what's wrong with you? Like, don't you have TV? Don't you have, Netflix? So we get really like it has to be, you have to have kids, but not too many. We're just boxed in from every angle. So it has to be, the right amount of kids, or that's
Mhm.
also problematic, you know.
That is so
So
funny. I only have three, Gila, but I remember I had four, two, and an infant, and I was going into the grocery store. And for probably the thousandth time, somebody said it was an older lady. And she said, gosh, that's a lot of kids. Don't you know what causes that? And I think it was just like, this is the thousandth time somebody's asked me, don't you know what causes that? Sometimes people are being cute. Sometimes they're being serious. Like three kids is a lot of kids. And so my knee-jerk response, I think I might have had a sassy moment was, you know what? I love lingerie and I have a really sexy husband. It just keeps happening. And her face, like it just dropped. Like I think I embarrassed her. I didn't embarrass myself because I just didn't want this conversation to keep occurring. I did not think three kids was too many. I would have had five if my body would have let me. I probably would have had more. I loved being pregnant. I loved having babies. I love little ones. The teenage years have proven to be a challenge. But the little stage is just the best. But everybody has an opinion and they want to, comment on it. And to your point earlier, I loved when I asked you, do you do anything with the naysayers feedback? And your answer was immediately no, because it's not like
um,
they have no value to the path that you're on. I think that's really important because women tend to be people pleasers. We tend to really care and be nurturers and be worried about how we are received and how our family's received. But at the end of the day, we're the ones living in our shoes in the house with the family that we're raising at the job that we want to have or don't want to have and we've been forced into. So stop worrying about what everybody else thinks.
I also think that as soon as you stop worrying about what everybody else thinks, you won't attract those kind of people anymore. I can't even remember the last time I had to deal with any of those types. You just won't attract those people. You will just, I don't know what you want to call it, your aura or your vibe or your chemistry or whatever. They just, you know what I mean? But people don't even blink. I think it's you give off that people feel they can say those kind of things to you. And you just won't. You'll just be competent and doing your thing. And if anything, people will be asking you how you're doing all those things. Like you said, like, oh, how did you get into publishing? Like, oh, how did you get a job, in academia, like at that college? Like, how do you get in there? People will be asking you because you'll be giving when you're really doing what you want to be doing and you're in your kind of, I want to say schwung, but that's not really a word, your zone. When you're in your zone, how sort of when you're swimming or walking or jogging and you don't even see what you're passing because
Mhm.
you're off in a
That's
zone, if
good.
you're doing laps or something, people will sense that and you'll gravitate to those people who want to know how to do that. And those people will really just fall by the wayside. And more often than not, when you meet those people years later, they're not doing what they wanted to be doing.
Yeah.
It's a lot of people speak out of a lot of their own like fears and insecurities, or honestly just thoughtlessly. I don't know how much you have to take seriously what everybody's saying, but I don't. You will attract less of those people, and you will attract a different type of person.
That's really interesting. I love that feedback. So your husband's from Johannesburg and you're from Canada. How did you all end up in Israel?
Well, I met my husband in Israel. I was visiting. I have an older sister who was living here at that time on a kibbutz. I don't know if you know what a kibbutz is. It's like
No.
a kibbutz is like a communal. It sounds funnier in English, but I guess it's like a communal farming settlement where it's kind of where people. It's kind of like a big farm. It can have also industry and companies as well, but let's say they started as farms initially, like way back, in the day. And so everything's kind of communally owned. There's a common eating area and a lot of common recreational facilities, that kind of thing. And in those days, she was living on a kibbutz, and in those days, that was a really fun. A lot of Europeans and Americans and different people like to come to the Middle East to work on kibbutzim in the summers because you could work in some sort of farming capacity. You could be milking cows or you could be taking care of chickens or whatever it is. Depends what they were growing on that kibbutz, bananas or avocados or whatever they were doing. But you were living, for free in exchange for your work. A lot of people in their 20s would sort of come here, could spend the summer on the Mediterranean, picking avocados all day.
Wow.
And you'd get a little tiny, room, and you would just eat in the communal hall. And it was like an exchange for labor.
Mhm.
You would be a volunteer on a kibbutz. You would do like farming work, but you would get to spend the summer on the beach in exchange for what you were doing, which in those days attracted a lot of people in their 20s from all over, from Brazil, from Sweden, from anywhere you can imagine, from England, from the US, obviously, of all backgrounds, just all kinds of people. So it was a really fun thing to do. I wasn't actually doing that. I was just visiting her. But he was doing that, and he was combining it with sort of a Hebrew learning program. He didn't speak any Hebrew. And so you could also have some classes in the morning to try to learn the local language. Some people also wanted to learn more about the culture. Other people weren't interested in the culture. They were just interested in the fun. So he was doing that, and I met him there. So that's how I met him.
That's a great story. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it gets more complicated because in those days, it was like the last years of apartheid, and the South Africans were very under suspicion anywhere they went. Like, where are you going, right? Because they had this fear that South Africans were just trying to get out. In those days, they didn't know if it was going to be a peaceful transition. It turned out that it was a peaceful transition, but some people were worried there was going to be a big civil war there or other disruptions, and so they were worried that people were just trying to run away, wherever they could, to escape a potential non-peaceful transition. It ended
Right.
up it was. So it was very difficult to fly with him because he would just get interrogated, where are you going? Why are you going there? Because they didn't trust anyone on that passport was just coming for a visit.
So how much of your personal life do you blend into your stories?
Well, I do blend quite a bit of sort of maybe technical biographical information. If I have Jewish people in my stories, they tend to be extremely diverse and sort of not your typical. I find that a lot of the depictions of Jewish people in literature is really one-dimensional, a really certain type of person, usually from New York or maybe from LA, and a very narrow
Mhm.
view. They're very rarely Jews of color or Jews who speak, all different kinds of languages, Arabic and Farsi and all different kinds of languages. Really, Jews are from all over the world. So I try to put in a really diverse types of Jewish people, if those are characters in my novels.
Mhm.
And for the historical fiction, I do use a lot of history. I'll go back to the Ottoman Empire or the British Mandate Palestine, which was what was going on here after World War II. The British were in charge of the Middle East. With a Good Eye, my newest novel, it takes place in Ottawa of 1980. A lot of feedback I've gotten is, you really feel like you're in 1980. You really feel like that sort of small town feel. So I do use a lot of relevant historical, geographical research. I have one novel, No Entry, that takes place in South Africa's Kruger National Park. I don't know, have you ever been on a safari?
No.
So Kruger National Park is, it's bigger than some countries. It's just a massive, what they call a game reserve, or what I think in North America, we think of them more as safaris.
Mhm.
South Africans actually don't really use the word safari that much. I find that we have a lot of maybe Walt Disney ideas and words. When you're actually in South Africa, they're like, okay, I don't know what you're talking about. Like we think we're going to safari, and they'll say like we're going to the bush. And like I feel like we learned a lot about these animals and like areas from Walt Disney or maybe Bugs Bunny. I don't know. So we're kind of like, we don't sound particularly intelligent the first time that we go to these places. It's pretty obvious that we're a little commercialized in our thinking of what a safari is,
Mhm.
and sort of these animals in general, wild animals, we're pretty we're pretty uneducated and we see a lot of cartoons. I'll speak for myself. I don't want to insult anybody else, but that's how I felt when I went to live in South Africa, that I had learned everything I knew about elephants and lions, from Walt Disney, and that none
Sure.
of it was accurate. So I do have one novel, No Entry, which takes place in Kruger National Park. And I felt that somebody who's originally Canadian and not South African, I was really careful. I wanted someone who was South African to feel that they really were in Kruger National Park. I had some South African beta readers, to make sure that, that they would catch anything that wouldn't be accurate. It's like eco fiction. So it's about this young heroine who takes on a elephant poaching ring. The ivory trade is a big issue, because I wanted to do something South African based, but I felt that apartheid wasn't my story, and that there were enough South African writers sort of covering their own story. I think there's maybe sometimes a little bit too much of people covering stories that really aren't necessarily their own, and that can be quite problematic. So I felt they were doing a great job covering their own. So I didn't want to get into politics, but I did want to write about the ivory trade and elephant poaching. So I've written about that. I've done a lot of Middle Eastern history, as I said. And that also requires a lot of research, what it was like in the 1880s or 1950s. And then I've gone back to Canada, basically. So I've covered a few different landscapes in my writing. That's what I meant when we first started talking about how you're not supposed to do that. You're
Yeah.
supposed to,
Stick
you're
with the
supposed to be a
genre.
romance writer, or, some other genre writer. And I really don't do that. I'm kind of skipping all over the place. So that the locations are biographical in the sense that I am personally connected to all of those places, to those three countries.
I imagine the diversity in your writing makes you an excellent writing coach. If somebody were to use your writing coach service, what would they expect? What does it look like to work with you?
You're right, correct. So I think because I've lived in three countries, and also because I teach students from all over the world, in one class I can have students from Ethiopia, from France, from Russia, from Ukraine. So I do have a wide variety of exposure.
Mhm.
I'm an expat myself. I live in an expat community. So also where I live, I'm just surrounded by expats. So the neighbors can be, from Australia, England,
Mhm.
Scotland, or whatever. So if somebody wants to work with me, usually it depends what stage they're at with their work. Sometimes people have already written a manuscript. So I offer different services. They've written a manuscript and they really just want somebody to read it, just a manuscript evaluation. They just really want to know what's working, what's not working, etc. Sometimes people are stuck. They've only written like 50 pages, and we meet monthly. They send me a chapter the week before, and then we would meet monthly, and I kind of keep them on a schedule.
Mm.
It just really depends where they are with their work. Manuscript evaluations are really popular. Regular coaching can be popular. I just meet them wherever they are, because I've put out 6 novels myself. So I've been at all the stages. So whatever stage they're at, I can, I can, I can
Meet
just,
them there.
hone in. I can meet them. I can just like thread the needle with them wherever
Mhm.
they are.
The accountability piece of it is huge to me. So just what you said about if you're actively writing and you know that once a month you're going to be meeting with your writing coach and that chapter is due a week before, it creates a level of accountability that often if you're trying to do it by yourself, it ends up taking years and years and years to write, in my personal experience. So I love that you offer that as a service. And obviously 6 published books, teaching English, have a master's degree in writing. I would say you're qualified. I don't know a lot about a lot of things, but that seems pretty qualified to me.
Yeah.
So where can people find With a Good Eye? Where should we be on the lookout to buy that book?
Well, so now people can find With a Good Eye on Amazon. They can find it on Amazon and Amazon Kindle. And I'm hoping, this quality control check at Audible is supposed to go through any day, and then they'll be able to find on Audible, and that'll be my first audiobook. And if I get positive feedback from that, then I'll turn more of my books into audiobooks. That's really the best place. Obviously, at the original publisher, which is AOS Publishing in Montreal,
Okay.
probably, that's economical for you if you are in Canada. But
Mm.
I assume the way everything works now with shipping and delivery, Amazon's probably the best place. But all of those, Barnes and Noble, the US has so many of these. I think someone told me they ordered it from Target. The US just has this plethora of, but all those main players,
Mm.
you can find it.
Excellent. I'll make sure to tag your website, anything you want me to tag in terms of the books in the show notes. The last question I love to ask a guest is, what is your favorite quote? Do you have one to share with us today?
Yeah, my favorite quote has been my favorite quote probably since like 10th grade. It's by Edward Blake. And I used to write this quote all over. Do people still have desks in school or we changed the tables? I don't know. I feel so old. Just write it all over my desk, and all over my binders and everything. Probably now everybody sits at a table with a laptop, but I used to write it all over. And it is, the mind is its own place and of itself can make a hell of heaven, a heaven of hell.
Mm.
And that was something that I went by, since I was a teenager. That really, you have to decide where you are. In your the mind is its own place, which I think in itself is a good quote.
Mhm.
And the extension just kind of elaborates on that. But it's really important to remember that other people can't put you in a place. You can decide where you are with your place. That's what I mean about naysayers and all those people. They don't have to take up rent in your head.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? You don't have to rent out headspace to any of these people. Like, you're the landlord.
That's absolutely right. I love that. That was a beautiful quote. You are the landlord is a great way to end this. And to your point earlier, you are the landlord, and the energy you project and the energy you deflect is because of the choices you make in your mind. And this has been such a valuable conversation. I've really enjoyed having you as a guest. You're welcome back anytime, Gila. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pamela. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.